Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, April 17th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abonima, Asa Winstanley, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 194 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We have another packed show for you today, including a discussion with journalist Aseel Mousa, who just evacuated Gaza with her family. We'll be joined again by Paul Biggar, tech innovator and founder of Tech for Palestine, to talk more about Israel's use of artificial intelligence in its genocide in Gaza and how tech workers are protesting their employers' complicity in the genocide. We're hoping to connect with one of our contributors in Gaza, Dunya Abu-Sitta. Later on in the program, of course, Jon Elmer will take a look at videos from the resistance in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the Iranian missile attack against Israel. But first, some of the news over the past several days. Intense Israeli bombardments, including airstrikes and tank shelling, have continued across all areas of the Gaza Strip, particularly this week in and around Rafah in the south and Nuseirat camp in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. Yesterday, 4 people, including a child, were killed and others were wounded when Israeli airstrikes attacked a house near Rafah. A separate strike in the Yebna refugee camp in Rafah killed 7 people, including 4 children. The United Nations reports that the Israeli army has detonated buildings, struck a market, and bombed homes in Nuseirat, central Gaza, over the last week. On Tuesday, armed Israeli quadcopters shot at children in Nuseirat. Reports emerged that the drones have not just been shooting at children, but loudspeakers on the quadcopters hovering over Nuseirat refugee camp are broadcasting sounds of babies and women crying.
جماعة الخير، كواد كابتر تطلق صوت أطفال الآن من مخيم انصارات زي ما انتم سامعين بالضبط. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. طبعا زي ما انتم سامعين بالصوت، أي حد بيطلع. امبارح استشهدوا شاب طلع مسكين يشوف إيش الصوت في مدرسة، طبعا بدأ والله ده نصره. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل.
The Geneva-based Euromed Human Rights Monitor reports that this psychological warfare tactic is being used to lure civilians toward the sounds in order to shoot them. The human rights group stated on Tuesday that according to testimonies from camp residents, sounds coming from the quadcopters also include voices of women and girls screaming, "Come help me, I am injured." In one instance, one 20-year-old man speaking to the rights group said that, quote, "We went out to see what was happening. We went out to see what was happening. No women were found, but we were directly targeted by a quadcopter drone." Many residents heard these sounds and responded to provide help. Also on Tuesday, the Israeli army killed 11 Palestinian children in a drone strike. The children were inside a playground near a market in the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza. One of those children, Hamza, was the cousin of Asma Abu Muzaid, a writer and gardener who appeared on the Electronic Intifada podcast in 2022 to talk about her chapter in the literary anthology Light in Gaza, Writings Born of Fire. Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reported on the airstrikes on Maghazi and Nuseirat from Gaza yesterday.
Horrific attack that just took place at a Maghazi refugee camp within the past 45 minutes or so. And a drone fired the missiles on a group of people. Later on, we learned it from eyewitness in the area that this were a group of children at a playground that was set up near a camp for displaced families. And those children are regularly visiting this playground. And just as a father of 3 children, I understand why displaced families would send their kids just for an hour or a couple hours just to keep them entertained and release all the negative energy in them. Because right now, displaced families have the hardest time inside tents or inside other people's residential homes trying to stay protected and safe. But it's as necessary as also staying safe just to give space to those children. So 11 children have been killed in this attack. And just one wonder what threat these children had posed to have the Israeli military fire a missile drone on them. 11 reported killed, with dozens of injuries in the area. Those who had the scene of the attack described horrific scenes of the children torn apart by the massive explosion caused by the missiles.
That was Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reporting on Tuesday. In Gaza City, in northern Gaza, at least 7 Palestinian police officers and 2 bystanders were killed on Tuesday when the Israeli army attacked their vehicle. The police officers were protecting and organizing the distribution of humanitarian aid, according to Gaza's Interior Ministry. The United Nations warned this week that food and humanitarian aid supplies were being prevented entry by the Israeli army, and stated that, quote, "We can't stress this enough. The occupying power's obligation to facilitate aid does not end when commodities are dropped off at the border." Over the weekend, Israeli quadcopters fired on Palestinians, including families with children who were attempting to walk back to their homes in northern Gaza after being forcibly displaced for the last 6 months. One video captured by a Palestinian journalist shows a mother holding her young daughter who was shot in the head by an Israeli quadcopter-fired bullet. Medics with the Palestine Red Crescent Society published a video of their ambulance team who treated children shot by the quadcopters when they were trying to return to their homes. Euromed Human Rights Monitor stated on Tuesday that the Israeli army, quote, "deliberately attacked thousands of Palestinian civilians on Sunday, killing and wounding dozens of them, and continuing its crime of forced displacement by preventing civilians it had previously forced to evacuate, including women and children, from crossing from the center and south of the Gaza Strip into their areas of residence in the northern regions, despite the end of hostilities in most of these regions. These actions may be considered crimes against humanity and war crimes." Euromed added that, quote, "as thousands of displaced people attempted to cross via Wadi Gaza Bridge, an Israeli military checkpoint on the coastal road known as Al-Rashid Street, to return to their residential areas in the northern strip, Israeli forces killed at least 5 Palestinians, including a woman and a girl, and injured dozens more. Other Palestinians have been left missing due to the chaotic scene. Euromed Monitor received identical testimonies confirming that the Israeli army forces fired tear gas bombs, live ammunition, including from quadcopter aircraft, machine guns from naval boats, and artillery shells directly and deliberately towards thousands of civilians trying to return home. Despite news circulating on social media about the Israeli army's condition-based permission for the displaced to return to the northern Gaza Strip, the displaced said they were surprised to be targeted directly and arbitrarily on Al-Rashid Street, the rights group said. Elsewhere in northern Gaza, Israeli tanks surrounded a primary school that was turned into a shelter for hundreds of Palestinians in Beit Hanun and shot at people inside. While the official number of Palestinians killed since October 7th is approximately 34,000, according to data gathered by the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, human rights groups and Gaza's Civil Defense Corps are estimating that an additional 13,000 Palestinians are missing. These people are either under rubble and debris, buried in indiscriminate mass graves, forcibly disappeared in Israeli prisons and detention facilities where some have even been killed, or their bodies have been taken by Israeli forces to unknown locations. Children continue to bear most of the brunt of Israel's engineered starvation policy. On Sunday, a video circulated showing children who were recovered from near drowning off the coast in Khan Yunis while they were swimming to retrieve aid dropped by planes, which landed in the sea, while humanitarian aid trucks remained stuck at the few border crossings because of Israel's refusal to let them in. The World Food Programme and other UN agencies were able to deliver fuel enough for just 4 days to restart operations at a bakery in Gaza City. Most of Gaza's bakeries had been unable to operate due to conflict and lack of access, according to the World Food Programme. Since October 2023, the Gaza Strip has been under an electricity blackout after the Israeli authorities cut off the electricity supply, and fuel reserves for Gaza's only power plant were depleted. 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿, a bakery owner in Gaza City, told the World Food Program that, quote, "Making bakeries work again will bring back life to the Gaza Strip." The UN emphasized that in recent months, northern Gaza has largely been cut off from aid and has recorded the highest levels of catastrophic hunger in the world. In mid-March, the Global Nutrition Cluster reported a near doubling of malnutrition rates among children under the age of 2 in northern Gaza. In southern Gaza, Al-Amal Hospital in Khan Yunis partially reopened following a 40-day siege by Israeli forces, which forced hospital staff to suspend all services last month. The Palestine Red Crescent Society, which is headquartered at the hospital, stated that services are limited to the emergency department only due to the extensive damage inflicted by the Israeli occupation forces, making the operation of other departments impossible. While Palestinian medical heroes reopen parts of hospitals, the United Nations reports that the health situation across Gaza remains dire. The largest medical facility in Gaza, Al-Shifa Hospital, has been completely destroyed, as we've reported over the past few weeks, and a vacuum in healthcare provision has been created, the UN says, following the destruction of Nasser Medical Complex in southern Gaza, which was once the second largest referral hospital in the Gaza Strip. The World Health Organization reported that most of the equipment and machinery at Nasser Hospital had been damaged, and the Limb Reconstruction Center, which the World Health Organization and its partners helped establish in 2019, is in ruins. The UN reports that, quote, "the Nasser Medical Complex warehouse, which previously provided essential medicines and supplies to other hospitals south of Wadi Gaza, has also been destroyed." Dominic Allen of the United Nations Agency for Sexual and Reproductive Health said that the maternal and neonatal clinic is now empty, full of destruction and the smell of death. Here is Dominic Allen in a video released by the United Nations on Friday.
An interagency mission with the World Health Organization and UNFPA at the Nasser Medical Complex. I visited here in January, where we delivered life-saving maternal health supplies, and today the warehouse of the hospital is literally burning behind me. Our supplies and those supplies of WHO and partners for the life-saving measures that are needed for the people of Khan Yunis are burning. Behind me is the maternity and neonatal clinic. Last time I was here, it was full of pregnant women, the midwives, the doctors, but also full of internally displaced people frightened for their lives. Today, it is empty. It's full of destruction. It's full of the smell of death. We are deeply concerned about the safety of the pregnant women and the women who need to come and find health services. And right now, in Khan Yunis and in the Nasser Medical Complex, there is none. We want to be able to stand up these services as soon as possible. But first of all, they need a ceasefire above everything else.
That was Dominic Allen of the United Nations Agency for Sexual and Reproductive Health. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli settlers rampaged inside and around at least 17 Palestinian villages and towns over the last weekend, including in the Ramallah, Nablus, and Jerusalem governorates. The United Nations reports that 2 Palestinians, including a 17-year-old boy, were killed in Al-Mughayr and Betin, and at least 45 were injured. Some 40% of those injured were shot with live ammunition, the UN stated. Israeli forces reportedly closed the entrances to the targeted villages, tightening movement restrictions along the route between the Ramallah and Nablus governorates, and were witnessed firing rubber bullets and tear gas canisters toward Palestinians, the UN stated. The Palestinian human rights groups Al-Haq, Al-Mizan, and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights urged the so-called international community to respond to the intensified violence by Israeli settlers across the West Bank. Settler violence against Palestinians is not a new phenomenon, but it escalated significantly on April 12th, the groups say, after a 14-year-old Israeli settler went missing and violent Israeli settler mobs began raiding occupied villages in the West Bank. On April 12th and 13th, the group state, quote, the Israeli settlers completely burned 14 homes, 13 livestock pens, a civil defense vehicle, and 3 car garages, as well as partially burning 15 homes and 4 livestock pens in Al-Mughayr village. Furthermore, 60 vehicles were set ablaze. A total of some 76 Palestinians were injured, primarily by Israeli settlers, with 18 remaining hospitalized, including 3 women and 2 children, at the time of writing. Of those, 6 Palestinians sustained serious injuries, with 3 currently in the intensive care unit. Israeli settlers further stole 145 sheep and killed 36 others. The Palestinian rights groups state that, quote, like the ongoing assault on Gaza, the current escalation in the West Bank does not take place in a vacuum. Between January 1st and October 31st, 2023, there were at least 1,038 incidents of settler violence. Since October 7th, settler attacks have more than doubled from an average of 3 to 8 incidents a day. Similarly, the rate of Palestinians displaced has more than doubled, an increase of nearly 119%, as 280 Palestinians are now being displaced on average every month due to demolitions. This is a direct result of Israeli settlement expansion, which is at its highest level since United Nations monitoring began in 2017, and Israel's illegal designation of a record amount of West Bank land has been designated as state-owned. In the Jerusalem area town of Beit Hanina on Tuesday, Israeli forces destroyed a house belonging to Khaled Mutasib, who was killed in October for allegedly opening fire on police, who chased him and killed him. The Israeli police were wounded but not killed. The Israeli High Court last month ordered the demolition of Mutasib's family home in an act of collective punishment, and not only blew up the house, but sealed it with tons of concrete. Today, April 17th, is Palestinian Prisoners' Day, which was established by the Palestinian National Council in 1974 as a national tribute to honor the thousands of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli occupation prisons and to support their legitimate right to freedom. Palestinian groups including Adamir, the Palestinian Prisoners' Rights Organization, and Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights state that as of today, more than 9,500 Palestinian detainees currently under Israeli custody are facing unparalleled retaliatory and punitive measures. Al-Mizan, which has recently published harrowing testimonies from men, women, and children who have been detained and tortured by Israeli officers, states that, quote, amidst Israel's genocidal military campaign against Gaza, over 3,000 Palestinian residents of Gaza have been detained by Israeli forces. This includes individuals from various demographics, including women, children, and the elderly, as well as professionals such as doctors, nurses, teachers, and journalists. Israeli authorities are subjecting Palestinian detainees to multiple forms of cruelty, torture, inhuman, and degrading treatment from the moment they are arrested and throughout their detention. Adamir says that, quote, the date of October 7th marked a significant turning point that imposed radical transformations on the reality of prisoners and detainees in Israeli occupation prisons. This was reflected across all dimensions related to this issue in light of the comprehensive aggression against our people and their detainees and the ongoing genocide against our people in Gaza for over 6 consecutive months. Throughout this period, the Israeli occupation authorities at various levels carried out horrific crimes against the prisoners, resulting in the deaths of 16 detainees due to systematic torture, medical neglect, starvation policies, and a range of violations and acts of abuse, targeting both male and female prisoners, including children, elderly individuals, and the sick, Adamir says. For more on Israel's treatment of Palestinian detainees, read my colleague Tamara Nassar's recent article, Israeli Prison System Claims Another Life, on electronicintifada.net. All over the world, activists are organizing protests, rallies, and events marking Palestinian Prisoners' Day and demanding liberation for the men, women, and children inside Israeli prisons. And finally, Earlier today, our colleague David Cronin carried out a citizen's arrest of Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Union Commission, for aiding the Gaza genocide. Oh, here's the video.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Mrs. von der Leyen, this is a citizen's arrest. You are charged with aiding genocide in Gaza. You expressed total support for Israel at the beginning of this genocide. The blood of Palestinian children is on your hands. You are a criminal, Mrs. von der Leyen. You should be in the Hague. You should not be here. You should not be running for a second term. You are a war. You are a criminal. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Let me end. Free Palestine!
Thank you very much, Mr. Thiessen. Thank you very much.
That was our colleague David Cronin carrying out a citizen's arrest of Frau Genocide, as our Irish colleagues say. And that's just some of the news on the ground in Palestine, from on the ground in Palestine over the last few days. Please go to electronicintifada.net to read some of our crucial new features by writers in Gaza, now up on our homepage. You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with Ali Abunimah. Coming up, we'll bring on Paul Biggar to talk about artificial intelligence and Israel's military and how tech workers are protesting against tech complicity in Israel's genocide. And we'll get a full update from Jon Elmer on the latest military developments in Gaza and the West Bank. But first, we have two contributors to the Electronic Intifada with us. Aseel Mousa joins us from Egypt, and hopefully we have Donia Abosita in Gaza. Aseel is an accomplished journalist and writes for the Electronic Intifada, The Guardian, The Intercept, Middle East Eye, and Al Jazeera English. Aseel, we'll go to you first. It's so good to see you. Tell us about where you are now and your process of leaving Gaza. I know that it wasn't an easy one. Tell us about your work now and where you are.
Hi, Nora. Thank you so much for hosting me. Now I am in Cairo. I evacuated Gaza just 1 month ago. And the process of evacuating Gaza is not easy at all. Everyone who wants to evacuate Gaza should pay $5,000 for each adult and $2,500 for each child in order to be allowed to travel. Personally, after paying this money for me and my family, we had to wait for 25 days for our names in order to be included in the list that would be allowed to travel through the Rafah crossing on March 17. And actually, the process of evacuating Gaza is exhausting psychologically. Leaving your home and your country. And maybe we feel a little bit safe here in Cairo, but actually my friends, my family are stuck in Gaza, and they are all waiting for their fate. So being safe in another country doesn't mean feeling comfortable. And actually leaving your beloved ones in Gaza and knowing that your country is still being bombed and your favorite places are being targeted is also hard.
Hi, Aseel. It's so nice to talk to you. Alhamdulillah ala salamatkum. And
Hi, Ali.
Thank you. And Aseel, we've been so proud of your work over the past few months amid this horrifying genocide. And you told me how that when you were going to leave Gaza, how sad you felt about leaving your home. That's what it is, leaving your home. and all of us can understand that. Tell us about what you left behind in Gaza. I'm talking about now the immediate situation. What did you experience in the last few months, and what did the people around you experience? We've read your articles, we see the news, but we want to hear from you what you can tell us.
Okay, I lived in Gaza, the rubble of my home, but I can't wait to go back to Gaza and build a tent on the rubble of my home and to stay there again. I left my friends, my colleagues, my family members. The situation in Gaza is dire. It's actually unbearable. No one can fathom being under Israeli bombardment for the seventh month, being prevented of the necessary food and the basic essentials. People now are suffering in getting milk for their children, or even getting diapers for them. Everyone waits for his fate, and the whole world that knows that there's no electricity, no internet, no drinkable or even undrinkable water in Gaza. People were killed while trying to get some flour to their families. So the situation there is catastrophic.
Aseel, can you I have so much admiration for you because you're just you've been working just relentlessly over the last 6.5 months. You've been writing for all of these different outlets, including the Electronic Intifada. What is it like working as a journalist under the conditions that you have been working in, and what are some of the stories that have stuck with you the most?
Okay. First of all, I just want to say that I'm so proud to work for the Electronic Intifada, and I'm so proud to work with you, Nora and Ali, and thank you for the supporting you gave to me through the month I lived in Gaza, and even when I arrived to Cairo. And according to working as a journalist in Gaza, it's very hard and it's risky. And actually, I was worried about my family because hundreds of journalists were killed along with their families, and a lot of them were threatened to be killed. Actually, I was nominated by Reporters Without Borders to receive the UNESCO 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿 Press Freedom Prize. And I was told by Reporters Without Borders when I was displaced in Rafah, but I actually didn't tell my family. I hide this news because I felt if I told them, they will feel more worried. As I was nominated with وائل الدحدوح, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜 and �على الزعنون. We know that Israel killed the family members of وائل الدحدوح, and it threatened 𝐓𝐡𝐞 to kill him and even to kill his family. And actually, �على was injured by Israel, so I was afraid to tell them. And according to the stories I wrote and through the Israeli aggression in Gaza, actually every story I write affects me very personally. I still remember all the details I documented about the suffering of my people in Gaza. But perhaps one of the articles that exhausted me psychologically when I wrote it was a piece I wrote about my friend and colleague Mahmoud Anauq. Mahmoud was 25 years old when Israel targeted his home and killed him along with his father, sisters, and brothers. Mahmoud was working for human rights organizations. And he was very ambitious, was very polite. I wrote that story just to tell the world that our martyrs who are being killed by Israel um, are not numbers. They are innocent people. They have dreams. They have families. They have beloved ones. Um, I used to consider Mahmoud as my younger brother. Um, and 2 days before Israel killed him, he texted me and asking me if I need any help as he was killed in Deir al-Balah. Deir al-Balah is in the middle of the Gaza Strip. And it was claimed to be a safe area by Israel, but it wasn't at all. So writing about a friend exhausted me psychologically, but I had to do this. I had to tell the whole world about Mahmoud and the innocent people in Gaza. And actually, there's another story I wrote for The Guardian. It was about the Palestinian woman. Her name was Hanan. Hanan was forced to give birth in her home um, without any essentials. She was assisted by a nurse who was displaced in her home. When Hanan told me the details of giving birth at home, I was like shocked and how you managed to bear all this pain. Actually, the people and the displaced people in Hanan's house used the light of their phones in order to facilitate the delivery of Hanan. So these two stories just broke my heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allah yarhamu Mahmoud and 𝐄𝐥𝐞 and all the martyrs. It's an unbearable toll. And everyone in Gaza who we speak to, who we know, has lost so many friends, so many members of their families. And they often say we don't have time even to grieve because you're just trying to
Yes.
survive from one day to the next. I want to show a tweet that you made just, I think, in the last couple of days. It's a very simple tweet. I think we can put it up on the screen. And it's about the sea in Gaza. You say, this is our sea, the Gaza Sea, our safe haven. Aseel, I want to ask you what you mean by that. Tell us about the sea in Gaza, what it means to you and what it means to people there.
Yeah, Wallah, I miss Gaza Sea. Even the people who are in Gaza are missing the Gaza Sea. Actually, when I was in Gaza, I didn't see the sea for 3 months when I was displaced in Al-Maghazi refugee camp, which is in the middle of the Gaza Strip. But when I evacuated the Al-Maghazi refugee camp because it was threatened to be bombed, and when I moved to Rafah, I passed by the sea and I saw the sea, and it was like a little bit of relief. I saw the people who were sitting on the beach while the sound of the warplanes are annoying them. So when I left Gaza and evacuated the Strip and moved to Egypt, I saw a tweet for my friend Mahal Husseini. I think she was visiting the sea, even though she is being displaced for the third time. And I was a little bit jealous that she went to the sea. We Gazans have no more beautiful place than our sea.
And the sea tell us, before the war, what role did the sea have in the life of everyone in Gaza?
Okay, we have so many cafes very close to the sea. Um, they all were bombed by Israel. It was our safe haven, as I mentioned in my tweet. Um, it's so hard to travel from Gaza, so we spend our vacations by going to the sea. We have to spend time with ourselves very close to the sea. That means everything for us. It's the nicest place in Gaza. When I want to go out with my friends or my family or my relatives, we think together where will we go, and we then end up deciding to go to the sea. Gaza is 360 kilometers, and we can't travel outside easily. So it's our only heaven.
Aseel, you mentioned that now you're in Cairo, you are in relative safety, you have water, food, shelter. I hope that you have all of those things. But you said you can't wait to go back to Gaza and to to put up a tent by the rubble of your home. Why do you feel that way?
Okay, look, all Gazans who evacuated Gaza say the same thing I'm telling to you right now. They all want to go back. We don't belong to any piece of land but Gaza. I evacuated Gaza, but my soul is still there in Gaza. And I say this, my parents say this, and my younger brothers and sisters say the same thing. Actually, when I evacuated Gaza, I was with my family, and my youngest brother, whose name is Hamoud. Hamoud is 13 years old. He was very afraid and worried when we were in Rafah, especially when the Israeli occupation threatened to conduct a ground invasion. And he was asking me and my older brother, who lives in the USA, please do anything. Just help us to go out of Gaza. And I swear to God, when we arrived Egypt, and we stayed in a fancy place for the first week, we stayed in Egypt. He told me, I see, please, can we go back to Gaza? Even the children can't bear the life away from our Gaza.
And in Cairo, I assume that there are many other Palestinians who have had to evacuate, but are like you and your family planning on going back as soon as possible. What are the conversations like with those Gazans in exile, in temporary exile in Cairo?
Mm-hmm.
How are you continuing to form community and solidarity there?
Actually, I'm lucky to have some of my extended family members here in Cairo. Eid al-Fitr was a few days ago. They came to visit, and we used and deliver so many kinds of sweets and coffee and some drinks. But here in Gaza, here in Egypt, we sat in front of each other and asking each other, when will we return? When will we go back to Gaza? We speak about the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza. We speak about the Israeli bombardment in Rafah, Nusayrat, Deir al-Balah, Maghazi, Beit Lahia, Jabalia, Tel al-Hawa. We speak about every single neighborhood in Gaza. We keep looking at our phones and following the news. and making sure that our relatives are safe or not. We do nothing but talking about Gaza and dreaming of going back to our homes, or even the rubble of our homes. Actually, yesterday I was with a friend who came from Gaza just 2 days ago. He was saying, I cannot even eat. My stomach just used to eat so little quantities of food. So even though here there is food and there's water, I feel I can't even drink or eat. I think of my parents who are in Gaza. I think of my friends. So we just belong to our homeland. We don't belong to.
So your
Yeah.
parents are still in Gaza?
No, I'm talking about my friend. My parents are
Oh,
here
your
in Gaza.
I see.
Sorry,
I
yeah,
see. Okay. Yeah. Aseel, you've been writing not just for the Electronic Intifada, but for international media.
Yes.
We just showed The Guardian, and you've written for other publications as well. And it's wonderful to see your work in those publications. But have you had a chance to look at some of the media coverage, particularly the English language media coverage about Gaza? And if so, what's your reaction to it in general?
Well, the Western media gets everyone mad, and to be honest, it gets the majority of us mad. I think the Western media coverage is unfair. This is why me and my colleagues are very determined to keep writing about Gaza, especially in the Western media outlets. You know that Israel prevented the Western journalists to enter Gaza and to cover the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So we tried to do our best in order to tell the truth of our country and our beloved people. And to be honest, sometimes I felt disappointed, and I work for nothing. Nothing just changed, and nothing can be changed if I wrote, if I'm not. But I keep remember the words of Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜, may his soul rest in peace, to pushing us to keep writing, to keep posting about Palestine and Gaza. I remember that my first article I wrote was for the Electronic when I asked him about his opinion and his advices. He let me feel that I did a victory when I wrote my first article. I didn't realize the importance of keep talking about Palestine and Gaza. So, but in this genocide, when I worked more for different Western media outlets, I realized his meaning about the importance of writing about Gaza and telling the truth and documenting the Israeli violations and talking about the voiceless people.
Well, Aseel, your work does make a difference, and Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 made a huge difference. You know, I don't know if I've had a chance to say to you, but the greatest treasure that Dr. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 left on this earth is you and his other students and all of those whom he encouraged to write, to tell the stories. And we continue to honor him by doing that. You made a huge difference, and he made a difference. And we thank you for that so much. And don't stop doing it. Don't stop doing it.
Aseel Mousa, you are a legendary journalist, and as I said, we're all in awe of you and your work and your tenacity and your courage, and we can't wait to see what you rebuild in Gaza after this is all over. Aseel Mousa, please take care of yourself. We can't wait to see what you write next. And thank you so much for joining us today on the live stream, ħabibti.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Aseel, and
much,
we'll see
Nora.
you
Thank
back
you so
here
much.
soon, I hope. We'll see you back
Yeah.
on the live stream soon,
Inshallah.
I hope. Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Aseel. Oh, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. Thank you so much to Aseel. We've been trying to get Dunya Abu Sitta on, but the connection in Gaza is just so unstable and fragile. So we might have to have her on next week, but we will keep trying.
And Dunya, maybe we can just show her latest article. She wrote an article about the education of more than 1 million children and young people in Gaza, including her own education, her university education, which has been which was basically ended.
Yeah.
She had 1 semester to go, and Dunya and her family have been displaced, like almost everyone in Gaza. We connected with her very briefly. We caught a glimpse of her, which was wonderful. But the connection just didn't work out. So hopefully we can get her next week or very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ali, do you want to introduce our next guest?
Yes. We are very happy to have Paul Biggar. He's a software engineer. He is the founder of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 and Darklang, and recently of Tech for Palestine, a coalition that now includes thousands of tech industry professionals who support Palestinian freedom. Paul's most recent blog post is about how Meta, the parent company of Facebook and WhatsApp, is complicit in Israel's genocide in Gaza. We're going to talk about that. Regular viewers may remember that we had Paul on a few months ago, and we are very happy to have you back with us, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure. Paul, you've been following closely the revelations about artificial intelligence, and I think you also watched the discussion we had a week or so ago with Anthony Lowenstein, the author of the Palestine Laboratory, and how these AI systems Israel is using basically to assist its genocide in Gaza, systems with names such as Gospel, Lavender, and Who's Your Daddy. And there's been a lot of focus on some of the details about how these systems supposedly work. How should those of us who are not necessarily versed in the technical specifics regard these systems and the role of AI in this genocide? How would you explain that to someone like me who doesn't necessarily understand all the technical aspects?
So the way that I would look at this is that the AI is about enabling automation and about providing plausible deniability around what they're doing, because the AI is junk, right? It's complete crap. There's no basis for it. It's an incorrect application of how to use AI, and the way that the information that they use, the process that they describe for creating it is entirely, you should look at it as this is being used as a way to enable bombings, to enable the killing of civilians, with absolutely no connection to its stated goals.
But then why use it at all then if it's basically junk? Why would Israel be using it? Why would they be allowing Israeli publications, albeit on what counts as the left in Israel, to publish about it when there's so much censorship? What do they want us? How does Israel want us to see it?
I think that Israel wants this to come across as a very technically sophisticated approach to the actions that they're taking. They want us to think. I've been thinking about this for quite a while. Why is it that this article was let through the censorship? And I think the idea is that they want us to believe this 90% number. So there's a number in the article where they say that 90% of targets are that was the threshold they use, and talks at other parts in the article about lowering the threshold to increase it, but to increase.
But just explain 90% of what?
Well, exactly. Maybe it might be good to take a step back and sort of like look at how AI works. What AI does is it produces a formula, like a mathematical formula, like 3x plus 4y, that sort of thing, algebra. And it creates this formula from past information that it has. And then it puts new information into that formula and tries to see from the answer, is someone a militant? And this is the same sort of thing as an Instagram, predicting a post that you might like, or Netflix recommending a movie. All of these models, they're called recommendation algorithms. And you can see from this that the AI, people think of AI as being something quite smart, and ChatGPT looks like it can talk to you, but all it's doing is in every case it's predicting something based on past data. It's not doing any intelligence. It's not doing any investigation. It's not intelligent in a way that a human is intelligent. And so when you look at it being applied for, is someone a militant, right? It's not verifying that someone is a militant, and in the Lavender article they indicated that the human verification, which was supposed to be done afterwards, is not being done. But even from that, it's a pre-crime idea, right? The very concept of it is that we shall predict who we think might be a militant. And I mean, there's a whole ton of things wrong with how they're doing Lavender. The change from how data is being collected to how data is being applied is like hugely problematic, and even if it was appropriate. But the idea that you would predict a sort of like a pre-crime kind of idea, it's at best these are suggestions for people to investigate, and there absolutely should be no direct killing of the people suggested by the algorithm. So when you look at why is this here, it's purely to sort of like whitewash or AI wash the automation of the genocide.
There is a discussion we had with Anthony last week where like we were talking about these kinds of surveillance techs, including AI, including biometric surveillance, and also in terms of what happened on October 7th, where the Palestinian resistance was very effective at taking down, the $1 billion wall around Gaza. And impacting the surveillance matrix around Gaza. And, it would be like very reasonable to assume that would have an impact on Israel's tech, capabilities to sell that kind of tech on the global market. And Anthony, said that actually there's been no indication that the tech market has taken a hit. Which also makes sense in terms of like global capitalism and how it works. And even if it doesn't work the way it's intended, it's still a commodity and a product that's being purchased and sold and marketed. What do you make of the Israeli tech sector? And do you think that it's it's self-branding as like the startup nation with all of these incredibly dangerous, lethal, and prone to mistake sort of software and tech is still being marketed?
I think the Israeli tech sector is quite large. There's 6,600 startups, I believe, in the Israeli tech sector. My main focus on it is recognizing how fragile that sector is. We advocate. We have a project called 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and we advocate for boycotting of Israeli startups. And one of the reasons that we do this, because they are so incredibly fragile. Startups, they're only as good as their next funding, and their funding is only as good as the last quarter. So in order for them to survive at all, they need to keep this inflow of capital, to keep the inflow of customers as well. And so startups can entirely fall over by missing a single quarter. And it's something where the even a slight fracture of the narrative, whether of a particular startup or of the tech sector as a whole, a tiny break there can lead to extraordinary change in their sector. And so it's something, on the weapons side of things, the weapons side of things is honestly the most secure or the most kind of like fundamentally safe sector, because it's something where kind of really doesn't matter as much as it does in kind of more B2B applications.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. You in your most recent blog post, you write that Meta, the parent company of Facebook and WhatsApp, is complicit in Israel's use of these automated killing systems, you mentioned Lavender. Can you explain how Meta helps Israel kill Palestinians?
So to be clear, I suggest that they may. One of the things that's discussed in the Lavender article is this book that's written by the YS is the initials that they use, and that's been identified as the head of Unit 8200. And in that book, they talk about what kind of data is being used in the system of Lavender. And as I mentioned, Lavender is using these signals, right? It's predicting on the basis of some signals, of some data about people. And one of the things that they suggest that they use is, are you in a WhatsApp group with somebody? And this kind of points to the flaws in the system, right? What does it mean if you're in a WhatsApp group with someone? Right? Does it mean that you are, living in the same building as them? It might mean that you have the same soccer team as them. It almost certainly doesn't mean that you are, in the same Hamas battalion as them, because they are almost certainly not. I mean, it would be ludicrous to use to have a WhatsApp group of this is where Hamas hangs out. So what they're doing is they're trying to extrapolate this who do we kill from membership of WhatsApp groups, and probably membership of WhatsApp group is not a solid indicator of is this person in Hamas, or is this person a Hamas commander, which was the thing that the algorithm was originally trained on. But Meta's role is unclear, and it is very important that Meta answers it. They have not released their latest transparency report. They were supposed to have released their transparency report by now. I'm told the transparency report is not good. I don't have any more details on that, but this is something where you can look at this company that has significant leadership sympathies to Israel. Sheryl Sandberg, who's on their board, is doing the sexual violence tour for Israel, pushing out that narrative that Israel has constantly been pushing on, and where there's it's pretty much correct to call it a hoax at this point. Mark Zuckerberg has donated to 𝐓𝐡𝐞, which, as as we all know, is the group that originated a lot of the false propaganda around the October 7th atrocity porn, and Zuckerberg donated to 𝐄𝐥𝐞, and also Guy Rosen, I don't name him in the article, but he's well known who he is, was a former 8200. That is their head of policy. The title is CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and this is one of the people who is most senior in their policy decision making. I'm told he's the person most directly responsible for the suppression of pro-Palestinian content on Meta brands, on Instagram in particular. So these are kind of the decision makers in this organization, and then you combine that with this, what we're being told about Lavender, that this information is being pulled out of Meta, and this is a normal kind of law enforcement claim that you would make. Law enforcement can make requests to social media companies, obviously, to say, who are people connected to, who are people talking to, what is the metadata of these conversations, and so the question has to be like, is Meta supplying this information to the IDF? Is it supplying it for use in Lavender? What knowledge do they have about its use in Lavender? Because there's a great many people at especially Guy Rosen, but across Meta, there's a great many people who worked in the IDF who were either IDF soldiers or in the IDF unit 8200. It's very common for 8200 soldiers to become part of the tech industry, and Unit 8200 is a massive organization. So there's a lot of cross-pollination there. So it's very natural to ask, like, where are they getting this information? Is Meta complicit? That's really the question for Meta. We want Meta to tell us.
Yeah. And just to really clarify this, so Guy Rosen is the Chief Information Security Officer at Meta, which owns Facebook and WhatsApp, which pretty much all of us use one or the other, pretty much. I mean, there are some people who use neither, but I'd say 98% of us are probably using one of them. He's the Chief Information Security Officer for Meta, one of the most senior policy and decision makers at Meta, and he is a veteran of Unit 8200, which is the Israeli Army Cyber Warfare Unit, a notorious unit. And going back to 2014, there was a group of veterans of Unit 8200, who came out, I suppose you could call them whistleblowers, who came out and said that what we were doing 24 hours a day was spying on Palestinians, not spying on Hamas commanders, spying on all Palestinians, listening to their phone calls, looking for any information that we could use to help Israel. That might be, for example, somebody who was, in a sexual relationship with somebody that might be frowned upon socially, and they would blackmail them. It could be people who need medical treatment. It could, whatever it is, that's what Unit 8200 was doing, and that they would actually celebrate when the information they had extracted had been used to kill someone. So that's just to emphasize who Unit 8200 is. And now we presume that, or it's been reported that this is the same unit that is responsible for developing or producing or operating these artificial intelligence killing machines, basically. And that's who is now someone who's a veteran of that is one of the top people at Facebook.
And not just Facebook. This is across Silicon Valley, across tech. You were mentioning earlier about how many startups and how big the tech scene is, right? This is the connections between Silicon Valley and Tel Aviv are massive, and we see it in venture capital. in small startups and in large scale startups as well. In Google, for example, a lot of the policy decision making now around what should be suppressed and what not, that decision making is made in the Google Tel Aviv office. In LinkedIn, a former IDF, in fact, a former Unit 8200 soldier, Tomer Cohen, is their CPO, and I'm told is one of the person most involved in the suppression of pro-Palestinian content on LinkedIn. So this connection between 8200 and Silicon Valley is, it's celebrated in Israel and celebrated among the Israeli tech scene in Silicon Valley. It's not at all some secret that we have uncovered. It is something, if someone is Unit 8200, they put it on their resume, they put it on their LinkedIn.
And just, you mentioned Google, and we'll say a bit more about that in a second, but this platform that people are watching us on now, YouTube, is owned by Google, and we've had a number of our videos taken down, live streams and other videos we've put up on the Electronic Intifada YouTube channel. We never get an explanation of why, we get a vague justification. Our appeals are always rejected. We've never had one reversed. And we've noticed, we can only guess why they're being taken down. People will know, for example, in a little while, we're going to have the military update with Jon Elmer, and we're going to show some of the videos we always show. And we take pains. We're actually extremely careful not to show anything gory, not to show, the most explicit violence. And yet our videos still get taken down. Again, we don't know exactly why. And we've noticed that other channels that maybe have fewer viewers or are less prominent or sometimes more viewers are putting up very explicit content, the stuff that we don't show, that we actually take out of the videos in the hope of avoiding this censorship, and they don't get taken down. So is that just random? Is it targeting? Obviously you don't know, but how are we to interpret this kind of pattern that we're seeing? And of course, it produces the effect of we're always second guessing ourselves. Is this the thing that if we say it or if we show it is going to get us taken down? So it produces self-censorship in a way.
It's very much designed to do so. I talked earlier about the plausible deniability as being a key part of AI and how it's used to sort of to allow the manufacture of killings and the automation of genocide with Lavender. But it's the exact same thing we see in social media suppression. There's a bunch of different systems. There's reporting. There's AI, and the AI is one of the key problems with AI is that it's unexplainable, right? We don't know why it's happening. And that is actually a key positive feature for a lot of the people who want to use it. It's impossible to say why the AI decided to take your system down. It's impossible to say why the AI decided to deny this healthcare coverage. It's impossible to say why this AI decided that this was the person whose bomb was going to be dropped on their house in Palestine. This is a core feature of AI for a lot of the people who are trying to shut this down. And when you look at Palestinian suppression or suppression of Palestinian content, there's so many different distributed avenues that people can use. There are groups of Israelis or pro-Israeli activists. There's a site called Movers. There's a site called I can't remember the other name, or something like Swords of Iron or something like that. Words of Iron, that was it. So these are actual groups of people who go around reporting and who have systems that vacuum up all of this pro-Palestinian content and links, and people go and they report them and they comment against them. And it's part of their huge Hasbara initiative, and it comes from so many different angles that it's meant to catch it in some way. It's meant to be suppressive. That's exactly the purpose of it.
Indeed. I wanted to shift the conversation a little, talk about how workers inside the tech industry are organizing against this, are saying, our labor should not be used in, to further a genocide of people, or to help law enforcement, or, the Unit 8200 target, not even identify, just kind of mass target people for execution. Can you talk a little bit about Tech for Palestine and what your colleagues and comrades are up to? I know there was a nationwide protest yesterday by Google employees against Project Nimbus, which is something that we've covered a few times over the last couple of years. Talk about that and what Tech for Palestine is doing right now.
Yeah, that was a wonderful initiative put together by No Tech for Apartheid, which is a collection of primarily Google, but also Amazon workers who are fighting against Project Nimbus, which has been directly implicated in the lavender situation that we were talking about earlier. The documents came out, and when I say came out, they were, I believe, No Tech for Apartheid helped reveal them, where they said that actually Google servers are running the AI algorithms that are killing Palestinians. So there's this connection between the work that workers do and this direct connection with the killing that's happening in Palestine. And so No Tech for Apartheid put together this wonderful day of action. You can see the videos online of all of them being arrested and led away. And I've heard that they also had all of their access to networks be removed, to corporate networks, which is probably, means they're either being suspended or possibly being fired, and that will of course lead to legal action. Google fired a Google worker who stood up at the Mind the View conference, which was a pro-Israeli tech conference in New York about a month ago. And his name was Eddie Hatfield, and he got fired fairly shortly afterwards. So, Google is railing from these allegations because, it goes against their internal code of conduct, which says that their tools cannot be used for violence. And so there's an awful lot of obscuring, again, what it is they do. They don't know what their customers are doing. They don't know what their clients are doing, is the narrative that they say. But as documents come out that show that they do, in fact, know what's happening, and that there is a lot of complicity within Google in a similar way as there was to Meta. So that's wonderful work by No Tech for Apartheid. Tech for Palestine is a slightly different approach. Our approach is to build and scale up projects that are either advocating for Palestine or that are directly fighting in some way. For example, boycotts are one of the big subgenres of projects that we produce. Today, I mean, we're 3 months old, so there's been a lot of change and a lot of sort of iterating based on what's been working, what's not. Today, the main thing that we do is that we're an incubator. We are incubating projects and really helping them try to figure out distribution and really have a high impact and focus on scale. A lot of the projects that we were seeing at the start were being built, and then there's a website that says this now, or there's something that does this now. And we're really trying to focus them on how do we actually get into the mainstream narrative. How can people think about the projects as bigger distribution mechanisms? And we're doing that by connecting projects, in some cases with leaders, in some cases with mentors, in many cases with volunteers. We have a volunteer database of people who want to help, and a lot of that is technical. Some of that is professional. So if you want a researcher, you want a software engineer, and many other things, project manager, designer, all that sort of thing, we have a database of it that we're providing to these projects in order to be able to scale up.
And Paul, I'm looking at the Tech for Palestine website and to the list of projects that you're currently working on. And I'll just give some examples. There's one called Books for Palestine, which is described as a toolkit and database of pro-Palestinian books activists can use for promotion. There's another one called, which I'm very interested in, Genocide Lawsuit Tracker, a website to publicize and support genocide-related lawsuits worldwide. And you've got all sorts of other ones. One here called Migrate Off 𝐓𝐡𝐞. 𝐓𝐡𝐞, many people may know, is an Israeli company that makes it easy for people to build websites. If you've got your own business or store or restaurant and you want to put up a website, a lot of people use 𝐓𝐡𝐞 without knowing even that it's an Israeli company. So I suppose it's self-explanatory there, helping people to migrate off 𝐓𝐶. The question I want to ask you, and I'm excited to see how all these tools and all these projects develop, but the question I want to ask you, when we spoke to you a few months ago, we talked about the enormous backlash you faced and others faced for speaking out about this genocide. You really rang the alarm bell about the complicity and the silence and the fear in the tech sector, which is enormous. And as much as we may hate to admit it, our lives are dominated by what comes out of the tech sector. I see a lot of frustration from people. We can't avoid these tools. I mean, we're learning about how Google is complicit, how Facebook may be complicit, how WhatsApp may be complicit. I mean, WhatsApp is our main tool for staying in touch with people in Gaza. There's really no avoiding it. So, that's the sort of dilemma and the paradox we live in. So I guess the question I want to ask you is, what have you seen a difference over the last 6 months of this horrifyingly ongoing genocide? Is there a shift in the conversation? Are people more willing to speak out? Clearly some are, because you've got thousands of people involved in Tech for Palestine. But what's the big picture here?
I think big picture, the narrative shift across the United States has been ginormous. It is so, it's difficult to overstate how much of a shift there has been from something where you simply could not speak up for Palestinians at all in October, and where my blog post made waves in December because no one else was speaking up about it, to today. I mean, I think that the most recent huge change was after the World Central Kitchen aid workers were being killed. There have been a ton of things that have moved the needle significantly. Another one is the self-immolation of Aaron Bushnell last month. There's a ton of small things like that have significantly changed the narrative. In terms of tech, I think the narrative has not shifted nearly enough, and I think that it's going to be a really long-term project to make it shameful to be Zionist within tech. And I think that that's where we really need to go. It's something where it's going to take a lot of boycotts. It's going to take boycotting the main things that BDS is boycotting, but also as you saw in our projects, 𝐓𝐶 and WhatsApp. The idea that we would keep on using these tools that are reporting where we should be blown up. It's a ludicrous idea that we would keep using WhatsApp, for example, or that we would keep using 𝐓𝐶, because that's something that props up the Israeli economy. It's a huge Israeli success story. So that ultimately what we are going to have to do in tech is look at every single place where power is concentrated for Israel, and that's an awful lot of them, as I mentioned earlier: venture capital, their own startup ecosystem. Many Silicon Valley startups are also founded by Israelis and former IDF members. So there's an awful lot of places where it's going to have to be. And I think so far what we've seen is a solid baseline of narrative shift. So when we started Tech for Palestine, I thought, we can change tech, and that will help change the US. And actually what's happening is the opposite. The US is shifting at a much, much greater rate than tech. And so I guess we're going to have to use the US narrative shift to change tech.
Just before we let you go, I just have a question that I'm curious about. If WhatsApp is not the most secure, what what communication texting software do you personally recommend for people?
Almost all activists that I know use Signal.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of my conversations around Palestine and around organizing around Palestine happen in Signal groups. All of the protests I attend, they're all on Signal. Signal is the place to be.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And if people want to get involved with Tech for Palestine, how can they do so?
So techforpalestine.org. At the moment, I think we still have people go into the Discord to volunteer, but we are putting up volunteer forms on the website. And really, people who have any sort of skills at all. If you're technical, wonderful. If you're not technical, there's the skills that you bring, translation, research, even legal and policy work. The great many skills that people can bring to projects that are extremely valuable. So right now it's very much join the Discord, and we'll figure out how to connect you. But I will say that we are a 3-month-old project. There's a lot of things up in the air, and there's a lot of things flapping in the wind sometimes. So we are doing our best.
Excellent. Well, you're doing amazing work. Thank you so much, Paul Biggar. You're a software engineer and the founder of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and Darklang, and recently of Tech for Palestine at techforpalestine.org. That's the coalition that now includes thousands of tech industry professionals who support Palestinian freedom. Paul, thank you so much. And please come back on very soon. I know there's always a lot to talk about in the sector.
For sure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paul. And you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with Ali Abunimah. We wanted to bring on Jon Elmer for the Resistance Report. Hey, Jon.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Jon. How are you today?
Great. Another great show.
Thank you. And a lot that has been going on the ground. And so you've been very busy you're always busy, but you've been particularly busy.
Yes, we've been particularly busy the last week. There's no question about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
well, yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
Take it away.
All right. So we're going to start in the Gaza Strip appropriately. We're going to start in Khan Yunis. And as Nora said in the news report, while the ground war in Gaza has curtailed because of the Israelis leaving, particularly leaving Khan Yunis after the 4-month operation in Khan Yunis, failed operation in Khan Yunis, failed ground invasion of Khan Yunis. The resistance attack, the Qassam Brigade's ambush that we covered on the show last week, chased the Israelis from Khan Yunis, and they left most of the areas of the south, and are just now, the Israelis are only along the corridor, the Netzarim Junction corridor that splits the Gaza Strip in half. And over the last the last 24 hours, 36 hours, the Israelis re-entered Beit Hanun in the northeast, which is the first place that the Israelis entered the Gaza Strip. And they're now returning to that area. People reported being besieged in the school, mass arrests of anyone over the age of 14 years old. And we're also just seeing the terrible crimes that are being unearthed, literally, at Shifa Hospital. Just brutal from a couple weeks ago's show. They're still digging bodies out that were buried by the Israeli army during the siege on Shifa Hospital, people with their medical equipment still attached to them, IV drips still attached, because Israel executed in the courtyard of Shifa Hospital patience. And the reason why they know where to dig right now, where they're digging for the mass graves, is because there's witnesses of the massacre at Shifa Hospital. Massacres in the middle camps that Nora reported on, of children in a playground. In Gaza City today, a massacre of people in an internet tent trying to get an internet in one of the few places in Gaza that you can get an internet signal that was reliable. Massacres there. So while the ground operation has curtailed, the aerial war is what is deadly for Palestinians. And in this period of time, the death rate in Gaza has barely changed. And that's the dangerous element of this in-between period where Israel carries out this war from the air. So let's start with an operation in Khan Yunis. Soraya Al-Quds released this video the other day from Khan Yunis. This operation obviously took place before the Israelis left. We're looking at a sniper team here operating a Dragunov rifle. And you can see the spotter and the shooter. We're editing, as Paul said, we're self-censoring here. We're editing the hit on this soldier, and we're editing him falling. But this is a sniper operation in Khan Yunis that Soraya Al-Quds showed us. And we see the triangle of the soldier here. This is this is before the Israelis left Khan Yunis. So this is from about a week and a half ago. Soraya Al-Quds sometimes takes a little bit longer to get their videos out than Qassam, who we saw were able to turn around their videos still after 6 months of war, 5 months of ground war. Qassam and Soraya Al-Quds still have the ability to not only carry out these operations, but to then to have their media arms distribute them. And this has been a crucial part of how we've covered this war the whole time, is from videos from the resistance that they're giving to us with their media embedded into these units. And so we see in this video that the spotter and the cameraman are part of this operation. As you can see here, the spotter with his binoculars and the shooter. And this is something, these sniper operations are something that we have seen consistently, and we will continue to see, because they're able to reach the distance of the buffer zone. And so they're able to reach Israeli soldiers in the buffer zone. Gaza is so small that any Israeli presence in the buffer zone is within reach of the resistance. And these videos have shown us. And again, this is Soraya Al-Quds, the armed wing of Islamic Jihad, carrying out this operation. The Israelis did not claim any casualties on this operation, but again, the video tells the story as it has throughout this entire war. So maybe we can go to the next one after this here tomorrow. Number 2 is, this is in East Jabalia. So we go from Khan Yunis in the south to east of Jabalia, which is in the north. And we see a Soraya Al-Quds fighter here talking to the camera and saying to the Israelis, this is just before they re-entered Beit Hanun, saying to the Israelis that they're here. The fighter says on camera here that we're here, we're waiting for you, and we're ready for you. These forces are not degraded invisibly degraded. These operations are still being able to be carried out. This is the spotter here for this heavy machine gun attack, showing us that's an automatic machine gun post on the Israeli border, and you can see him with his Dishka 50 cal heavy machine gun. Now, this weapon that we're seeing used here, and pointing out that this is also an Israeli position behind the berm there. You see this weapon mounted on the back of the pickup trucks on October 7th that went into Israel. It's a weapon that you see on the back of pickup trucks all over the world, called a technical when they put them on it. But this is a Soviet weapon, a heavy machine gun that has a range of 2 kilometers. And so everyone in the buffer zone from the edge of East Jabalia here Israeli positions in the buffer zone are able to be reached by the resistance. And again, this is a fighter who's obviously aware of the narrative that's happening. They're obviously still communicating directly because this fighter here is telling the Israelis that when they come back, that they'll be ready for them, that they're there waiting for them, while the Israelis are massacring children playing on a playground or sending quadcopters of crying babies to try to get Palestinians to come out of their house. Incidentally, that crying baby quadcopter only works because Palestinians do come out and help people constantly. And we see it in every single footage that we see from Gaza, people running towards the massacres to help people out immediately. We see people digging people out with their hands because there's no heavy machinery, because the Israelis went around and systematically destroyed the heavy machinery so the civil defense crews couldn't dig people out of the rubble. And so we're seeing that. And we saw people along the border, as Nora reported, trying to go home to the north. And Israelis shot those civilians, but we see the fighters here still able to operate. And so I think it's always interesting when Israel puts these fighters dialogues in, because you can see that they're still communicating. They're still able to get information and really communicate directly with the narratives that are happening on the ground. So this preceded the Israeli re-invasion of the north. And this is what we're going to see, I think, for the coming weeks and months, maybe, that the Israelis will operate on these raids. They called Shifa Hospital raid. They called it the gold standard of urban warfare. So this is the kind of idea that Israel plans to carry on with as we go forward here. So we can't see the result of this operation, but we still see the same weapons being deployed and still able to produce these videos. And let's go to number 3, Tamara. This is another interesting operation that we've been following throughout the course of this war. This is this is 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Actually, this is 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Sorry, this is 𝐓𝐡𝐞's Islamic Jihad. This is in Khan Yunis, and we see them again here with another Israeli quadcopter, commercial quadcopter that has been landed by the resistance. We see Qassam and 𝐓𝐡𝐞's both doing this, landing these quadcopters. You can see he's showing you the camera there on the video for the listeners. And for people listening, we're looking at a perfectly intact quadcopter. We see there on the wall indicating the day that it happened, showing that they're able to produce these videos immediately. The notice on the wall was the same day as the video was produced. And we're looking at a quadcopter that's unscratched. Again, clearly pointing out that the resistance is able to, presumably they're using GPS spoofing, they're jamming the signal and then using GPS spoofing to land these helicopters under their control. So they're using the terminology in their field reports that they took control of, is how the language of the field reports is. And this is the first video that we're watching here. This is the first video that we've seen the resistance actually film the drone in the air before landing it, which I think is one of the reasons they haven't been doing that is operational security for the method with which they're using to down these, which we don't know. They haven't shared that with us. But you can see, again, this is a second drone. This is in the middle camps now. They can do it from the north to the south of Gaza. And we're looking at a perfectly pristine, intact, not even scratched quadcopter. So it's clear that whatever is happening in the GPS spoofing, jamming process that the resistance is using is that they're able to take over these drones and completely land these quadcopters intact. These are commercial drones. It's not totally clear to me what the Israelis are using this for beyond what we all know they're using them for, which is to shoot their TikTok videos, because they have, of course, Israel's one of the world leaders in drones. They have many different types of drones that they deploy with encryption and systems that would protect in some way against this kind of electronic warfare that we're seeing happen. But you can see he's pulling out this. It looks like it's basically brand new. These are not falling out of the sky. They're not being shot out of the sky, although we've seen that as well, of course. Both of those things we've seen before on video throughout this war. But very interesting development that they're still able to do this and have been able to do this throughout the course of the war. I think we'll probably hear more about it after the war, but able to take down these quadcopters without a scratch. It's pretty remarkable. And then you can see there, that's footage of it in the air, that their fighters are able to video it right over top of them. And that's the first time that 𝐄𝐥𝐿 or Qassam has shown us the drones in the air. I don't know if that gives clues to the Israelis about the system that they're using, but they clearly don't seem to be worried about that, because this was part of a video that they released this week. And again, the language that they've been using throughout the war is that they take control of them. They're commandeering the signal and landing these quadcopters. And then we've seen 𝐄𝐥𝐿 do this. We haven't seen Qassam do it, probably for operational security, but we've seen 𝐄𝐥𝐿 take out the data cards and use the footage that the drone is capturing. So 3 interesting operations, all from the last week released. Again, we're still doing videos that are only from the last week, and we're still able to do that to cover the war. So that's the Gaza Strip, where the resistance is carrying on. Consistently, we also saw a sniper attack yesterday in the north from the Qassam brigades, and the Israelis admitted that a Shaldag Air Force Special Forces soldier was seriously wounded in an operation in the north. And I think based on the operations that the Israelis are doing in the Netzarim Junction, where they're expanding the buffer zone that divides the Gaza Strip in half from north to south, there's been, as always, resistance along that corridor. Anytime the Israelis are present, there's resistance. And that's also the case in the West Bank. We'll take a look here at a video from Tubas in the central northwest bank. And we're watching fighters here with the West Bank videos. This is 𝐄𝐥𝐿 Tubas brigade. And we're seeing these videos linking up an IED here, improvised explosive device. They're wiring it up, and they're talking about the ambush, which is now we're looking at the fighters with their guns getting ready, because it's a complex ambush. They set the IED against an armored bulldozer, and then their fighters are moving here, waiting for the bulldozer to hit that IED that's planted. This is Tamoon Junction, outside of Tubas, outside of the camp, the refugee camp, where there's been battles. There's basically, as Abdul Jawad said the other day, there's an intifada for sure in the north of the West Bank. There's armed struggle throughout the West Bank, but the pace and intensity of operations, it was 85 resistance operations in the West Bank just last week. This is one of 9 IEDs. There was 16 shooting operations. And if you include demonstrations and that there was more than 34 ops a day last week, including the demonstrations. We know that settlers, as Nora said, the settlers have been taking advantage of this situation in Gaza and in after the Iran missile attack to increase their violence. So what we see in the built-up areas in the West Bank is armed struggle, and then what we see in the countryside is the settlers working with the army to continue these attacks in the countryside. So resistance in the refugee camps has been fierce, and these IEDs are developing, and they're clearly getting better, and they're all over the West Bank. So this is an operation from Tubas in the north of the West Bank that I wanted to bring you guys. And we're seeing here, we've taken out the audio again, as Paul said, to try to beat these the censorship that's happening. But we're seeing there on the camera's jostling because the fighters are firing on the bulldozer. So it's a complex operation that happened in the West Bank. So I just wanted to bring you guys that from the West Bank. And then we did a show on Sunday about the Iranian missile attack on Saturday night in Palestine, Operation True Promise, which was an unprecedented, the first time that Iran has struck Israel from its territory to Israeli territory directly, not using allies to carry out this attack. It was a response. Operation True Promise is what the Iranians called it, and it's a true promise to respond to the Israeli assassination of the two the two Quds Force generals, Iranian generals, that were assassinated in Damascus, in the consulate in Damascus on April 1st. And so the key attributes that we talked about on Sunday about this operation were that it was telegraphed. So there was 2 weeks preparation. The Americans were able to reposition their forces. They were able to set up an alliance that included the UK, France, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. And the Iranian attack even was announced before it was launched. Iranian state television said that the operation will begin soon. So we had a lot of warning for this, and Iran said that the missile attack was part of Article 51 of the UN Charter, the right of self-defense, and it's also the assassination on the consulate in Damascus is seen as Iranian territory. So Iran responded with an attack on Israel. So let's take a look at some of these images here, because the attack began by clearing airspace. And so this was there was a lot of firsts in this missile attack operation, but this is one of the first tests that we've seen of the attempt to use electronic warfare to drop the GPS and GNS, the Russian GPS signal that the Iranian missiles and drones work on. And so we can see here, this is flight tracker footage of showing essentially a corridor from Iran to Israel. Planes were completely grounded. And this is part of the electronic warfare test that we had never seen before on this scale. And people in the Middle East are still talking about GPS being messed up in the Middle East. Planes are complaining about it because their navigation systems aren't working. People's cell phones all say that they're at Beirut airport. People in Middle Eastern countries are getting Israeli dating apps, like switching their location of their dating apps and getting Israeli positions. And a lot of these GPS spoofings that the Israelis are using are channeled through bases in Israel. So it's obvious that this is an Israeli part of this Israeli electronic warfare plan. And let's take a look at, so there was 3 major elements to this operation. There was unmanned aerial vehicles, and this is what we're looking at here. This is the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 drone. This is a fiberglass drone, propeller flown, rocket launched, and it's a fiberglass drone. And so that makes the radar and the heat signature off of this are very low. And so they're difficult to track on radar. And so the dropping of the GPS systems and the Russian GPS system was an attempt by Israel to drop these drones before they entered Israeli airspace. They also used fighter jets to shoot down these drones. And that was what they used in an alliance. There's still a lot about this operation that we don't know, but according to Israeli figures, there was 350 missiles and drones, and 185 of them were these 𝐓𝐡𝐞 drones, and we'll see those in action coming up. The main targets, just to give you the main targets of this operation were pretty clearly 3 targets. There was a signals intelligence base in the Golan, which is run by Unit 8200 that Paul just talked about, and then 2 desert bases in the Negev desert. Nevatim Air Base, which is the home of the F-35s, and it's also 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is the air base that the Americans bring their weapons airlifts that have happened since October 7th. That base takes those airlifts, and also Ramon Air Base further south in the Negev, and that's a major Israeli base in the south. And so those are the three targets. They're very symbolic targets. They're well-defended targets, and they're targets that are in the desert. And so this is Iranian attack did not target cities. It did not target built-up areas in Israel. It targeted, apparently, pretty clearly, the Israelis showed footage of hits on 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Air Base. And so Iran used three tools. They used these Shahed drones, and if we look at the next one, they use these cruise missiles. Those Shahed drones are about the speed of a car. They're about the cost of a car, and they fly low and slow. And so the launching of the attack, the Israelis had many hours to prepare their defenses. These are the cruise missiles that were launched. The Israelis say 36 of these cruise missiles were launched. And then there was 110 ballistic missiles. We don't know. We can't verify these numbers. Iran didn't say how many were fired. And of course, there's a lot of information warfare about this operation, a lot of fake videos, by both sides and by the public in general. And so there's still a lot to learn about this operation. But the Israelis said 350 missiles and drones, and the Israelis said 60 tons of explosives. These cruise missiles are faster. It's a jet engine powered, and it's treated essentially like an unmanned jet. And so these cruise missiles were met by and treated by as essentially as fighter jets. Both the drones and the cruise missiles were shot down by fighter jets. So you had fighter jets all over the Middle East shooting these relatively cheap, $50,000 for a Shahed drone, compared to the F-35s that shot the drones down is the most expensive, the costliest weapons platform that's ever been developed. And so we know that there was a massive economic imbalance in this attack, Iran using very cheap, for the most part, very cheap weapons, and the Israelis responding with incredibly expensive weapons. But there was this is a 16-minute attack by the time it all shook out. And the day began with Iran seizing an Israeli linked container ship in the Straits of Hormuz. So this is the third part of the operation, was these ballistic missiles. And this is something that's really interesting from Iran, because this was the first test of their missile systems on this scale. And you can see here, this is a diagram of the Iranian missile program. They have 16 different types of missiles that could have been used for this operation, that range between 700 and 2,000 kilometers. And the ballistic missiles, so the drones took 6 or 7 hours to fly across the Middle East. The cruise missiles took a couple of hours, and these ballistic missiles take minutes. And these missiles are large missiles with serious warheads. They're precision guided missiles. These are the Iranian response to the smart bomb. They can carry 500 kilograms of explosives. And as you can see on that diagram, they're up to 20 meters tall. They're a massive missile. And so the Israelis said, just to repeat that, they said 185 of the Shahed drones, 36 of the cruise missiles, and 110 ballistic missiles. And what we know about the ballistic missiles is that they were the core of the missile, the evidence for missiles that we saw was the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 missile, which was developed in 2016 and is a precision-guided weapon. It's a liquid propellant, and it also has maneuverable re-entry vehicle, so it's able to be aimed precisely. And that's what we saw on the targeting of the Israeli base, that it was a precise hit. The weapons hit where they wanted to hit. And so these ballistic missiles are fired up in a large arc out of the atmosphere. The cruise missiles go higher than the drones, and the drones are down low to the ground. So these three operate together, and the idea is that you flood Israeli air defenses and tie up their fighter jets with the cheap drones and cruise missiles, cheaper cruise missiles, and then you follow up with the ballistic missiles. And this is the part of the operation that is really, I think, the demonstrative part of the operation, is that Iran could have fired many, many more times the ballistic missiles that they did fire, and they could have targeted places in Israel with precision. They didn't target cities. They didn't target internet tents. They didn't target children on a playground. They targeted very symbolic, very well defended desert bases, and they struck them. And we know that they struck them. Israel admitted that they struck them. They haven't said full details of what happened. We know that at least 5 hit each of the bases. And so let's take a look here. I'll show you what it looks like when each of these vehicles is launched. So let's do number 8 here tomorrow. These are the Shahids. They're launched in 3 different ways. They're launched off a rack. There you see it out of a canister, and also vehicle borne there. So these are able to be launched from 3 different systems. That's the rocket boost that I told you about. So they fire out with a rocket, and then the propeller kicks in. And the propeller is what carries it. So it's extremely slow in military terms. And that was one of the things about the operation on Saturday, was that it took a long time to develop. We knew that these drones were on their way for many hours. So the Americans had the opportunity to reposition their defenses, to put together their alliance, and then to shoot these down. And they, from what we understand, most of these were shot down. These were shot down outside of Israeli airspace, over Jordan, and over Iraq and Syria. In particular. And if we look at the next one, number 9, you can see the ballistic missile launches. These are obviously very significant weapons here. And if Iran was attempting to do damage to Israel, or to escalate this war, we would have seen more of these ballistic missiles. As you can see, there's the liquid fuel propellant launch of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 missiles. If we look at number 10 here, we can watch the drone flying over Iraq. You can see the delta wing there of the Shahed drone flying low over Iraq, and you could hear them. And there's a lot of video footage from Iraq of these flying low over Iraq. And these $50,000 fiberglass drones were being hunted by tens of millions of dollar fighter jets from 5 different countries. From what we know right now, it appears that the British, the Jordanians, the Americans, and the Israelis were shooting them down. It sounds like the French were part of the patrol. And then I believe what we know about the Saudis is that they were doing aerial refueling of these, of the fighter jets. And so, again, a massive disparity in what the cost of the launch versus the cost of the intercepts. The Israelis use a missile defense array. And so the fighter jets and the electronic warfare were the first part. And then they have the Arrow system, which is for the ballistic missiles. And then people are probably familiar with the Iron Dome system. That's the system for short range and medium range projectiles that we'll talk more about those here coming up. So let's look at the missiles over the West Bank here, because we have footage from the West Bank of the ballistic missiles entering Israeli airspace. So you can see the Iranian missiles are traveling downwards in this video. The Israeli interceptors are traveling up in this video. We're looking at just red streaks in the sky. I kind of promised you I'd do a video breakdown of which direction the red streaks were going. And if you see the red streaks turn into a big ball of fire on the ground, it means that they've landed. There's not a lot to break down in these, but you can see that there's a lot of misses. And the Israelis were bragging. I mean, they said 99%, which was just absurd. And then the Western media picked that up, and that was the headline for the whole day. The numbers that the Israelis gave didn't suggest 99%. And this video doesn't appear to be showing 99%. It looks like you can see interceptions when the upcoming red flare hits the downcoming red flare. You have an interception, and there's clearly those. You also see the arrow system above the atmosphere blowing up. That was one there that you just saw. Intercepting the missiles in the atmosphere, but it's clear above the atmosphere, but it's clear that there's many of these missiles that are landing in this footage. So we don't know. The targets were military bases, and so the information control of the Israeli sensor is basically total. But this is the stage of the attack that is the demonstrative part about it. It's Iran showing that they have the capability to do this. It's Israel testing its alliance, its electronic warfare, and its now tens of billions of dollars air defense system that they have. And so this was a real test for both sides. It was a test of the Iranian missile program that, for the last 20 years, the Iranians say that they have the 6th largest missile program in the world. Americans have tens of thousands of troops in the Middle East that are all targets for these, because this is about 1,200 kilometers from Iran to these targets in the Negev desert. And so this is footage from the West Bank. And I guess I can leave it to people to do the math on this, but that sure doesn't look like 99% interception rate to me. And when you have missiles as sophisticated and as powerful as these ballistic missiles that Iran is sending, it gives Israel an idea of what would happen if this war were to actually escalate. And I think the Iranians were very careful with this attack. They telegraphed the attack. They allowed the Americans to prepare with the Israelis for the defense. And it sounds like the Americans downed most of the drones. It wasn't the majority of them weren't shot down by Israeli fighter jets. And these are the air defense systems that Israel has bragged about for many, many years. And clearly some of them missed. Let's look at number 12. Because this is footage that we're looking at here is from Hebron, from Halil in the south of the West Bank. But if we listen to this one, do we have audio on this one? So you can hear Palestinians underneath these missiles clearly don't believe they're the target of these missiles. And you can hear Palestinians in the West Bank here. This is from Nablus, footage from Nablus of Palestinians cheering the Saturday night missile strike by Iran. So I just wanted to bring that. We showed you that on Sunday, but I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. Now let's look at number 13 here tomorrow, because I don't really have to do much of a breakdown, but like I said, when you see the red streak turn into a ball of flame, you're looking at direct hits. I believe we're looking at hits there on Ramon Air Base. And the Israelis admitted to 5 hits on each Ramon and Nevatim. But again, the numbers that we saw in the sky look higher than that. So I'm not sure if in the coming days we'll hear more. I'll bring you whatever updates, but you can clearly see those strikes hitting the ground. We got one more of those that show it from 3 different angles that Middle East Eye put together. If we do 13B tomorrow, You can see those strikes in the Negev. Again, on Nevatim Air Base and Ramon Air Base. Nevatim, the base where the F-35s are stationed. And the Americans and Israelis said that a C-130 cargo plane, which is the weapons transfer plane, was hit. And you can see there's the Israeli air defenses going up in that footage. You can see them being launched. The Israelis and Americans launched from warships. The Israelis used their Sea Dome, which is their Iron Dome mounted on their warships. The American Navy ships fired anti-missile systems. And so this is sort of the future arriving. And you can see there's the clear strike making it through, and followed up by the second strike. And then there's a third one. And so these numbers don't really add up. And I think that's something that, of course, Israel has been consistent about since the beginning of this war, lying about what's happening, covering up what's happening, obfuscating what's happening, not fully acknowledging what's happening when they do acknowledge. And so we can see from this clearly multiple strikes hitting those bases, and the bases are precision targets. So these were not fired at cities. They were not fired at populated areas. And it cost the Israelis more than $1 billion for the 16 minutes of air defense, which was a fraction of Iran's capabilities and the full Israeli capabilities that we're seeing on display here. So I guess we'll talk about it more in the discussion after about Israel's response to this. But this demonstration by Iran, the fact that they're willing to do this, and then the fact that they're able to successfully do this, as I think a really, it's a really strong development in Israel's impunity. Their ability to attack Iran and Iranian allies without any response appears to have wrapped up with this operation. I want to just show you a couple things from Hezbollah. If we look at number 5 here, Hezbollah released this video this week of their Iranian-made Coronet anti-tank guided missile hitting Israeli signals tower here. And this is part of this war. And on Saturday night, we saw the way that these systems integrate for Israel and are critical to Israel's defense. And so we've seen a lot of these towers get hit throughout the war. And this is Hezbollah preparing the landscape for these wars. A lot of times you hear this is just a tower. But as Nasrallah pointed out, these are not just towers. This is the network connectivity that Israel uses for its military. These targets are degrading Israel's capacity to carry out and to escalate the war with Hezbollah. So we've seen that since October the 8th. There's been more than 1,300 Hezbollah attacks since October the 8th. They carry out about 15 a day, between 8 and 15 a day, every single day across the whole border in Lebanon. Let's look at number 6 tomorrow, because this is this was yesterday. This is footage from South footage from South Lebanon of a I left the audio in for that one too. So that's you can see that's an Ababil drone that Hezbollah is firing, and Hezbollah fired this. They said at an Israeli Iron Dome air defense platform yesterday, which is the third one that they have targeted. And we know that the Israelis have at least 10 of these, and then the Americans gave them at least 2 more. But if we look at the next footage, there 13C here tomorrow, we can see that Hezbollah released this video yesterday of the Iron Dome platform. That first shot just gave you the statistics for the Iron Dome, which is that it's a $50 million air defense platform Each interceptor that we saw in that footage firing is a $50,000 interceptor, and the launcher carries 20 interceptors. This is footage from Saturday night that Hezbollah released yesterday, and we weren't sure what Hezbollah's role in the operation was, which is, again, if it wasn't a demonstrative operation by Iran, Hezbollah could have carried out a significant attack from Lebanon, which would have tied up a considerable part of Israel's air defenses. So we're seeing here on the screen, you can see the launches from the Iron Dome on Saturday night, and Hezbollah is tracking the launch. They have got this Iron Dome unit under surveillance. You can see it launching interceptors, and then we see in this footage, it's dark footage, but you can see it being struck there twice. And then if you keep looking at that circle, you'll see the system apparently exploding. So Hezbollah is able to hit these Iron Dome systems and knock them out, which is also a development that we haven't seen before on this level, knocking out this system. You can see here the rockets, outgoing rockets, in the missile interceptors being fired. And this is something that the Israelis are trying to get more of from the Americans, is more of these interceptors. And the drone footage that we just saw before this from Hezbollah, there was no air raid siren on that drone. The drone flies low to the ground. It's fiberglass. It doesn't have a heat signature. And so it evades this radar. And is able to hit these Iron Dome platforms. The Israelis admitted from that drone we saw in the previous shot 3 casualties at the Iron Dome platform, because these platforms are manned platforms. They involve a radar station, a command and control vehicle, and then the warheads themselves. And so Hezbollah is able to target these Iron Domes on Saturday night, which is something we didn't know. We didn't have confirmation of until late last night when Hezbollah released this video. So many elements to this operation, Iranian operation, that we don't know about yet and will maybe learn in the future. But what we do know so far about it is a remarkable development, an unprecedented development, and something that's put Israel in a bit of a strategic bind about how to respond when the capabilities of Iran are on display in the way that they were. And as we talked about on the Sunday show. So if people didn't see our live stream with Mohammed Marandi, I really suggest you check that out, because we went in depth with him on this Iranian missile attack. So that is the resistance report from the south to the north of the Gaza Strip, from the West Bank, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, and from Iran. So it was a busy week. A lot of information, a lot of videos to try to sort through, because there was a lot, both sides put out videos that weren't actually there was a lot of, as there always is, they always sneak in some Russian footage. The Israelis snuck in some Russian footage and said that it was Iranian footage. So yeah, so it was a lot, Ali. You're right. To look back to it's been quite a week. A lot going on.
A lot. Thank you so much, Jon. Yeah.
And thank you for breaking it down, because even for someone like me who follows this stuff closely, it's really a lot. And as you say, there's misinformation coming from all directions. Mm-hmm. Mostly, in my opinion, from the direction of Israel and its backers. And I think Iran was pretty transparent about what it was doing, and pretty transparent that it was not seeking an escalation. It was seeking to make a point, which is to deter Israel. And I think that's a really key point here, that the Israelis are on notice that Iran has the ability to strike anywhere in Israel.
Yeah.
And pretty much it can't be stopped. Now the question, though, is just in the last few minutes as we've been live, Netanyahu has come out and he said that basically, because there's been a parade of foreign ministers the German, the British, David Cameron, and Annalena Baerbock, and presumably the Americans have been on the phone. And their approach with Israel is, oh, look what a good job you did on Saturday. You shot down all those missiles. You really showed how smart and capable you are. Now you don't need to do anything. There's no need to retaliate because, of course, all of these powers that helped Israel to try to fend off the Iranian attack and failed because the missiles made it to their targets, don't want a full-scale war. But what Netanyahu has said in the last few minutes or the last hour or so is, thank you for your advice. We'll make our own decisions. So the Iranians seem to be, the Israelis seem to be intent on doing something. What it is unclear. It's also not clear what capability they have, because the Israeli Air Force doesn't really have the range by itself to make it all the way to Iran. I was looking back at the 1981 Israeli airstrike on the nuclear reactor in Iraq, which was almost as far as Iran. It was short of the Iranian border, but it was almost as far as Iran. And that raid really took the Israeli Air Force to its limit. They don't have an aerial refueling capacity of their own, so they would have to rely on allies who are willing to help them to carry out a counterstrike on Iran. And it's not clear that their allies are willing to do that. In the 1981 raid, from what I read, they had to add additional fuel tanks to their fighter jets, which they then dropped, and they sort of barely made it to Iraq and back. I think they do also have ballistic missiles as well, but we've never seen Israel use ballistic missiles, if I'm correct. They've never used them in any kind of military action. So there are technical aspects there, but also political and geopolitical aspects, because the Iranians have made it very clear that we will respond. There have even been Iranian officials saying the missiles will be flying immediately. This time there's not going to be any kind of warning. Now, the political aspect of this is also very interesting, because it reminds me of the 1991 Gulf War. And people who are old enough will remember that at that time you had the international coalition, so-called coalition, led by the United States, to go and expel Iraqi troops from Kuwait, which Saddam Hussein had invaded. Now, this was politically a very fragile coalition, let's say, or it was a coalition that depended on Israel not doing anything, Israel keeping a low profile. For example, Syria was in this coalition. Syria was in the coalition, if I'm correct, the Saudis and others. So during that war, Iraq fired Scud missiles at Israel. And this was the first time. So the scenes that we saw in the last few days were, in a sense, not unprecedented. They're unprecedented in many people's lifetimes. But I remember, and I was listening on a shortwave radio at the time, that's how long ago this was, the Scud missiles, which flew from Iraq and hit Tel Aviv and hit targets in Israel. And that was a major, major, major thing at the time. And the Israelis wanted to retaliate, but the Americans told them, don't. You may not, because politically, this would break apart our coalition. The unity of the coalition depended on Israel staying out. And I think I remember at the time that the Americans even went so far as to deny to the Israelis whatever electronic transponder codes they would need to tell friendly from hostile aircraft. In other words, if the Israelis wanted to fly a raid into Iraq, there would be the risk that they would shoot down American airplanes if they didn't have these transponder codes, which the George W. Bush administration didn't want to give them. So the Americans forced the Israelis not to respond to the Scud missiles in 1991. And it strikes me that there's a very similar dynamic playing out here, where the US interest is not to allow Israel to respond, at least to temper it as much as possible. The difference being that this administration is, every US administration is extremely pro-Israeli, but this one seems to be taking it to an extreme, and it's unclear if they're willing to put their foot down. The last thing I want to say, and I think you alluded to this, John, is the idea to me of the Saudi Air Force flying refueling flights for airplanes that are defending the Zionist genocide regime as it murders children in Gaza, the idea of the Jordanian Air Force defending the Zionist genocide regime. There was a report in Yedi'at Ahronot citing Israeli military sources saying that Israeli aircraft were allowed to fly in Jordanian skies in order to try to intercept missiles. Well, none of these air forces, none of these countries have lifted a finger to stop the genocide in Gaza. I think, like most people, particularly people in the region, I am, I just can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around it.
That's shameful.
Yeah, Jordan really put themselves out there. Their position is very, very stark on this, dropping, intercepting, and sending flaming wreckage all throughout Jordan in order to defend missiles that people in their own country were cheering for, people who are closer to the target cheering for. So the people on the street didn't believe that they were the target of these strikes. So that coalition was remarkable. And I think that the Americans putting that coalition together is part of the give and take with the Israelis, saying you can't respond. We will step up and do this defense of you, but that's it. You can't carry out another strike after that, because the principal reason is the Americans are very vulnerable in the Middle East. They have troops and bases all over the Middle East that are well within, much closer than firing these ballistic missiles at Israel. And so there's actual vulnerability for American forces that has them stepping in, I believe, and saying to the Israelis that this, in a way that the Israelis ignore them about Gaza. I'm not sure that it's the same in this circumstance because of the presence of American troops, the vulnerability of American troops, and also Iran, like you said, that Iran said they will respond immediately. This attack was 2 weeks in the planning. The Iranians all but gave them the window of the attack. Israel had full preparation for the attack ahead of time. And there was only, like I said, it was a 16-minute operation. There was no second wave. There was no third wave. There was no saturation of the air defense system by the ballistic missiles. They could have fired many times more drones than that. Iran has a major drone program that has, despite sanctions, been able to operate. And so Iran was just sending a message without doing any, very carefully. They very carefully targeted these bases and didn't target civilian areas, didn't do something that would lead to an escalation, but just demonstrated that they could do this and will do this. And so when I was saying unprecedented, I was saying from Iran, it's the first time from Iran, from direct indirect territory. And it's the first time that there's been a missile war on this scale. That was the first sign, the first that we've seen of that. And so I think that Iran made its point. The Americans were saying that they didn't know about the assassination of the Quds Force generals. They were saying that the Israelis told them 5 minutes before, and the Americans tried to say they were upset about that. It's not clear how much back channeling they did to the Iranians, but the Americans are fine with telling the Washington Post that they told the Iranians that we weren't part of this. Don't hit us. Don't be mad at us. Don't target our tens of thousands of troops and billions of dollars of assets in the region. So yeah, the escalation ladder, it's not clear what the Israelis can do. They lack strategic bombers. They need the Americans for an attack on Iran. And it doesn't appear that the Americans are interested in that kind of World War III escalation. So it's remarkable that the Iranians have the precision to thread the needle on not escalating to World War III. And I think, I think history will reflect that both sides will say that they came out the winners of that. I think Biden's quote was "Take the W" to Netanyahu. You defended the attack. We'll rebuild the missile interceptors, and the Iranians, I think, clearly demonstrated their capabilities for the first time. We saw the Iranians hit the American base after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. But this is the first real long-distance test of Iran's Iran's missile system in battle.
It seems to me like the Israelis may strike. I don't know. I mean, that's the feeling I have. Like, it's a really strike.
Yeah.
I mean, the quote you just said, John, from Biden about, or that was communicated about, telling the Israelis to take the W. As we know from our own experience, even with just Israel lobbyists, Israel always refuses to take yes for an answer. So who knows? Who knows? But that's the feeling I have at the moment anyway.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to watch that, obviously, very carefully. Let's, Ali, I know that you were supposed to speak at a conference in Germany a few days ago. Tell us about what happened.
Right. I was invited to speak at a conference in Berlin, the capital of Germany. And it's a conference that was organized by members of the Palestinian community. There's a very large Palestinian community in Germany, and members of the Jewish community, including a group called Jewish Voice for Peace, a German group. There's, of course, similar group in the United States and in other countries as well. And I was among a number of speakers. Others included Hassan Abu Sittah, the surgeon, the doctor who spent the first 45 days of the genocide saving lives in Gaza, and Salman Abu Sittah. You've heard that name, that family name, Abu Sittah, on this show earlier today when we were trying to speak with Dunya Abu Sittah, and you've heard it previously because the Abu Sittahs are a large family whose land was stolen from them when they were ethnically cleansed in 1948, and their land has now been turned into so-called kibbutzes in the Gaza envelope. And Salman Abu Sittah is in his 80s. He's a Nakba survivor. Now, prior to the conference, there were all sorts of threats from the German government that they would ban it. They didn't ban it, at least not for the first 45 minutes, but then they literally stormed the conference. And we actually have some videos I can show very quickly. Tamara, let's take a look at video number 1, if we can. And this is outside the building, and it was a private venue where the conference was being held in the Tempelhof district of Berlin. And you can see the heavy police presence. And if we jump to video number 2, that actually shows the moment where people are shocked We can put the sound on. Let's put the sound on.
What?
And that's sort of the moment the police. I think that's it for that one.
And that was during Salman Abu Sitta's testimony.
Right. Salman Abu Sitta was speaking by video, and actually it was a recorded speech, and then he was due to join by Zoom for a live Q&A. He didn't travel to Germany, and they cut him off a minute into his speech. Salman Abu Sitta is an extremely dignified elder. He was speaking about what was happening in Gaza, and the police raided it, and then they actually cut the electricity off to the conference hall. I mean, Israeli-style tactics from the German stormtroopers, from the Gestapo, let's call them. And then we can go to number 3, Tamara, and this, we'll just play a little bit of this because it's a long video. This is just a few seconds of Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta talking about what happened to him.
Is Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta. I've just returned from Germany, where I had been prevented from entering the country for attending a conference in Germany to give evidence on the war in Gaza and my witness statement as a doctor working in its hospitals. So this morning...
Yeah, and then he goes on to explain what happened. He flew from the UK. And by the way, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta has just been elected as the rector of, I think, is it Glasgow University?
So.
University of Glasgow in Scotland. So, and he's a British citizen. He was flying from the UK. He was detained at the airport in Berlin. He says he was interrogated for 3 hours and then told that he would not be permitted to enter Germany, that there was a complete ban on him entering Germany for the month of April. And he was told by the Germans that if he were even to send a video speech or try to participate remotely by Zoom, he would be breaching German law, and he could face up to a year in prison, which is extraordinary. And then let's go to 3B, Tamara. This is a tweet that I posted, but what it shows is a translation from Die Stern, which is a well-known German news publication, which, of course, Die Stern, like most of the German media, has spent weeks inciting against the conference, lying that it's a hate fest, an anti-Jewish hate fest. And you can see there that according to the information that Die Stern had received, entry bans had been instituted against Salman Abu Sitta and Ghassan Abu Sitta. And it says there for a third speaker, Ali Abu Ni'mah, an entry ban is currently being examined. I have no doubt that had I landed in Germany, I would have been prevented from entering the country. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to speak by Zoom because the Germans prohibited the conference, and they told the organizers, because I was asking the organizers after that police raid which shut down the conference and turned off the electricity, will we be able to continue online? And what I learned is the German police had said that if they even tried to continue the conference online, they would face criminal penalties in Germany. So this is what they're doing in Germany, which purports to be the country that has learned the lessons of history. They are sending in jackbooted thugs to shut down a conference against genocide. They're sending in stormtroopers to stop an 86-year-old man bearing witness to the ethnic cleansing that he personally survived and went through. To shut down a doctor, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, who is giving evidence of the genocide. And another person who was participating in the conference or was scheduled to participate in the conference is Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, the head of the Democracy in Europe movement, DiEM25, and he was actually handed a ban by German authorities on all political activity in Germany. I'm not sure how long that ban lasts. He put out a statement on it, but he was prohibited from giving any sort of speech anywhere in Germany, including by Zoom or what we're doing now remotely. This is the level of repression in Europe. It is absolutely extraordinary.
It's incredible. And it just reminds me, like, this is not the first time that you were, that a conference like this was, that you were a part of was shut down. I remember, I don't know, time is hard to measure, but maybe 6 years ago, maybe you and Max Blumenthal were in Germany.
No, that was David Sheen.
Oh, that was David Sheen.
David Sheen
okay.
and Max Blumenthal, and they were supposed to speak at a theater in Berlin, and that was shut down. And in effect, you cannot hold any public event related to Palestine in Germany. And the next day, you know, over that weekend, because I was supposed to speak on Saturday, but Sunday, Monday, people went out into the streets in Berlin to protest this repression, and they were beaten up and arrested by police. So this is European democracy. This is the West. These are the values of the West. This is what they're telling us they're defending. These are their values. Jackbooted thugs to stop people from talking about genocide.
Yeah.
It's again like the Saudi planes and the Jordanian planes participating in defending Israel. I can't wrap my head around what's happening in Germany.
Like John said earlier about the Iranian military response to the Israeli attack on Iran, that it was a glimpse of the future coming towards us. I mean, I think this is also a glimpse of the future coming towards us, a glimpse of Europe's future. Europe, including Britain, you know, although it's not part of the EU, it's still part of the continent of Europe. You know, is increasingly demolishing its own democratic structures, such as they are, and you know what kind of vestiges there are of free speech in order to, by this stage, just support and prop up an open genocide in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, and if you think about it, what's the significance of us? I mean, sure, we were going to have the conference in Berlin, but they can't allow any dissent. The point is, you know, they're not storming newspaper offices or shutting down TV channels because they don't have to. There is no very little free discussion of this in European media. I would say the United States is almost better than Europe at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, which is shocking. I mean, that's absolutely shocking. But the other thing we still have. The other thing we still have in the United States for now is the First Amendment, and they don't have that anywhere in Europe. Of course, that doesn't. I'm not trying to present a rosy picture. There's tons of censorship in the United States. We were talking about this tech censorship, for example, the self-censorship we have to do because it's done through YouTube and Google and Facebook and what have you, and of course through institutions like universities and so on. But the idea of the police storming a conference and shutting it down is not one we have quite yet in the United States.
Yeah, it may be coming. Absolutely. Incredible. Asa, how have people been responding to our fantastic show today?
Well, I have to show this one first because it related to what we were just talking about. Are we the baddies? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
If by we, well, it depends who we is, but yeah, it's a funny comment. Thank you very much. Yes, we had people watching from all over the world as usual today. Hi from Ireland. Hi everyone from Catalonia. Eager to start my weekly mental health treatment from the incomparable EI team. I don't know about that. it may not be good for your mental health
Maybe in the second
necessarily.
half,
Yeah.
Community is always good for mental health, and I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that's what we provide for each other, and I know that helps me, but just the sheer horror is hard to know how to live with.
Yeah.
Devon, UK, Washington, DC, Stockholm, Sweden, Calgary, Alberta. Welcome, Calgary, Alberta. Hello from Germany, Free Palestine, long live the resistance. Thank you. Bratislava, Slovakia, Singapore, Shamai from Caernarfon in Wales, North Wales. Shamai means hello. Tanweer, regular viewer, says greetings from Minneapolis. Thank you, Tanweer.
Thank you.
And this viewer said, I just now found and subscribed to this channel. I was so late. It's never too late.
Never too late.
Welcome.
And lots of support, of course, to all our guests. Hats off to David Cronin. If you missed that earlier, go back and watch that. Dave tried to citizens arrest.
Yeah, can we just show? And Dave also wrote a post about this that's already up on the Electronic Intifada. And Dave Cronin, our colleague, for those who are new to the channel and new to the publication, who carried out a citizen's arrest today or attempted to carry out a citizen's arrest of Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, an obscene conference of the war industry. These are the people who profit from death and destruction that were all gathered for this smiling Nazi speech. And Dave Cronin stood up and read the charge of genocide to her. It's fantastic. You go to the Electronic Intifada and watch the video there. We showed it a little earlier on the live stream.
Yeah.
And this wasn't the first time that he has attempted to carry out a citizen's.
Yeah, I think he's arrested Tony Blair a few years ago.
Right.
A classic. That's also out there somewhere. Let me see what else. We had a viewer from Indonesia today. That's great to hear.
There is so much support for Palestine in Indonesia. It's really incredible.
And we had a lot of comments of support for Aseel from our contributor Aseel, who was on the show earlier, speaking from Cairo, who has escaped Gaza, escaped the genocide in Gaza. And this viewer says, Rifat lives in you, Aseel. Thank you very much for that. Loads and loads of comments. Also, thank you to Paul Biggar as well for all you're doing. And Boaz says, this is really great research, Jon Elmer. Thank you for everyone on the EI team. And as always, the Resistance Hour was extremely popular, of course. Thank you to everyone who wrote in. Thank you.
Absolutely. And let's take a look at the front page of EI. We have loads of new features from our contributors in Gaza, as well as some new podcast episodes, standalone episodes. Just this morning, our colleague Omar Karmi published an episode on our podcast, video and audio, of course, of a conversation that he was recently a part of and moderated with his aunt, Ghada Karmi, and Andrew Feinstein, who was a member of the ANC. And both of them were talking about kind of this moment in Palestine solidarity activism and especially the expansion of global revulsion against Israeli apartheid and Zionism. Really incredible discussion. And so I encourage everyone to go to our YouTube channel or to the EI website to find that and watch it or listen to it. Just really remarkable content, as always, that we have here.
Yeah, and much of it, again, is from our writers in Gaza. That's so important. We was hoping to have Dunya, who wrote that piece about Gaza schools, We'll try and get her next week, but you can see that most of the articles on the front page are by writers in Gaza.
Yeah.
So don't, the fact that we can't get them on the live stream doesn't mean they're silent. They are writing for the world to read. And you heard Aseel at the beginning talking about why she was writing, to bear witness, to let the world know. And people in Gaza are, doing this with great difficulty and great dedication. So the least we can do is to read and share their work, send it to friends, family, put it on Facebook, flood Facebook. Let's overwhelm Facebook's air defenses with good information.
That's right. And as always, if you appreciate this content and want to help support our writers in Gaza and help support this operation in these times of great censorship and intimidation, you can always go to the Donate Now button at the top of the page there. You can also go to our YouTube channel. There are plenty of other ways you can support financially and otherwise. But as Ali says, the best way is always sharing, disseminating, liking, and subscribing to EI and all of our content on all of the platforms that we have. So thank you. And with that, on behalf of all of us at EI, of course, Tamara Nassar behind the scenes, thank you so much for your exquisite production and direction once again. Asa, Jon, Ali, and myself, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next week.